Picture this. It's 2035. You're walking through the streets of Berlin, Paris, or Rome. The architecture is still beautiful. The cafes are still there. But something feels different. The shops have fewer customers. The young people are gone. The factories are quiet. The banks have new foreign owners. And the politicians are still arguing about the same problems they argued about 10 years ago. This isn't science fiction. This is the trajectory Europe is on right now. And most people have no idea how bad it's actually going to get. Europe isn't just having a rough decade. It's not just dealing with temporary inflation or a bad year for growth. What's happening right now is structural collapse. 6 deep, interconnected wounds that are bleeding the continent dry. And here's the terrifying part. Even if European leaders woke up tomorrow with perfect solutions, it might already be too late. The damage is done. The decline has momentum. And the rest of the world is already moving on without them. You've been told Europe is rich, stable, advanced. You've been told it's a model for the world. But what if that's just the memory of what Europe used to be? What if the Europe of today is actually a slowly sinking ship, and everyone on board is too proud or too scared to admit it? Before we go further, I need you to ask yourself something. If you had to bet your life savings on one economic block for the next 20 years, would you bet on Europe? Or would you quietly move your money somewhere else? Think about that. Because by the end of this video, your answer might scare you. Europe's first fatal wound is the one nobody wants to talk about because it sounds boring. But it's the most devastating of them all. Europe is old. And it's getting older. Fast. Right now, the median age in the European Union is over 44 years old. In Germany, it's 46. In Italy, it's 48. Japan gets all the attention for its aging crisis, but Europe is right behind it. And unlike Japan, Europe doesn't have the industrial efficiency or the technological edge to compensate. By 2050, 1 in 3 Europeans will be over 65. 1 in 3. Imagine trying to run a competitive economy when a third of your population is retired. Here's why this matters more than people realize. An aging population doesn't just mean more healthcare costs and pensions. It means fewer workers, fewer consumers, fewer taxpayers, fewer entrepreneurs, fewer soldiers, fewer innovators. It means a society that stops taking risks because it's too busy trying to preserve what it already has. Old societies don't build. They maintain. And eventually, they decay. Germany, the engine of Europe, is already losing population. Its birth rate is 1.5 children per woman. You need 2.1 just to replace the population. Without immigration, Germany would be shrinking by hundreds of thousands of people every year. And immigration? That's become the most toxic political issue on the continent. So Germany is stuck. It needs young workers to survive, but its population doesn't want them. That's not a policy problem. That's a civilizational trap. Italy is even worse. Its population is projected to drop from 60 million today to under 50 million by 2050. Entire villages in southern Italy are already abandoned. Schools are closing. Hospitals are understaffed. The Italian government is literally paying people to have babies and offering houses for €1 just to get anyone, to move into dying towns. It's not working. You can't bribe people into reversing demographic collapse. And it's not just about the numbers. It's about the economics. When you have more retirees than workers, your tax base collapses. Pensions become unsustainable. Healthcare costs explode. Government debt spirals. Young people get crushed by taxes to pay for old people's benefits. So what do? They leave. They move to America, Canada, Australia, anywhere with opportunity. And that makes the problem even worse. It's a death spiral. But here's where it gets truly dark. An aging society is a society that stops investing in the future. Why build new infrastructure when you're worried about paying pensions? Why take risks on new industries when your voters just want stability? Why reform anything when the majority of voters are older people who benefit from the current system? Aging democracies become gerontocracies. And gerontocracies don't innovate. They stagnate. Then they collapse. Let me paint you a picture of what this actually looks like on the ground. Walk into any German university today and count the international students. Now ask yourself, how many of them are planning to stay after graduation? The answer is fewer and fewer. Because Germany's startup scene is anemic compared to Silicon Valley or even Bangalore. The bureaucracy is suffocating. The language barrier is real. And the culture doesn't celebrate risk-taking the way America or China does. So these talented young people get their degrees and leave. They go where the opportunity is. Now multiply that across the entire continent. The UK lost tens of thousands of young workers after Brexit. France sees its best engineers move to the US tech sector. Spain's youth unemployment has been above 20% for years, so anyone with ambition leaves. Poland and Romania have lost millions to Western Europe, and now Western Europe is losing millions to North America and Asia. It's a continental brain drain that's accelerating every single year. And the people who stay? They're getting older. Go to a German board meeting. The average age is probably 55. Go to a Chinese tech company board meeting. The average age is probably 35. That 20-year gap isn't just demographic. It's psychological. It's about appetite for risk. It's about understanding new technology. It's about energy and drive and hunger. Europe's leadership class, both in business and politics, is old. And old leaders make old decisions. Here's the math that should terrify every European policymaker. In 1960, there were 6 working-age Europeans for every retiree. Today, it's 3 to 1. By 2050, it'll be closer to 2 to 1. Imagine you're a 30-year-old worker in 2050. You're not just supporting yourself and your family. You're supporting half a retiree through your taxes. Your pension contributions are going to pay someone else's retirement, and you have no idea if there'll be anything left for you. That's not a social contract. That's generational theft. And young people know it. This is why populism is rising. This is why trust in institutions is collapsing. This is why birth rates are falling even further. Young Europeans look at the system and see a rigged game. They see their parents' generation pulling up the ladder behind them. They see a future where they work harder for less, where housing is unaffordable, where pensions are fantasy, where climate change will hit hardest. So they stop having kids. They stop investing in a future they don't believe in. And that makes everything worse. The demographic crisis isn't coming. It's here. And it's a slow-motion catastrophe that Europe has no plan to solve. Europe's second fatal wound is debt. Massive, suffocating, unpayable debt. The European Union's combined government debt is over 13 trillion euros. That's trillion with a T. Italy's debt-to-GDP ratio is over 140%. Greece is at 180%. France is at 110% and climbing. Spain, Portugal, Belgium, all drowning in debt. Even Germany, the so-called responsible one, is at 66% and rising fast after years of spending on energy subsidies and defense. Now, some economists will tell you debt doesn't matter as long as you can service it. As long as interest rates are low, you can keep borrowing forever. And for a while, that was true. The European Central Bank kept rates near zero for over a decade. Governments borrowed for almost nothing. It was free money. But that era is over. Interest rates are rising. Inflation is back. And suddenly, debt that seemed manageable is becoming a noose. Italy is now paying over 4% interest on its bonds. When your debt is 140% of GDP and your interest rate is 4%, you're spending more than 5% of your entire economy just on interest payments. That's before you pay for healthcare, pensions, defense, education, infrastructure, anything. You're paying interest on old debt with new debt. That's not a sustainable economy. That's a Ponzi scheme. And here's the kicker. Europe can't just print money like the United States can. The dollar is the global reserve currency. America can run deficits forever because the world needs dollars. The US Treasury bond is considered the safest asset on Earth. When there's a crisis, money flows into dollars. But the euro? It's a regional currency with no fiscal union behind it. The European Central Bank can't just bail out Italy without Germany's approval. And Germany doesn't want to bail out anyone. So you have a currency union without a political union. A system designed to fail under pressure. Greece already collapsed once. It took a massive bailout, brutal austerity, and a lost decade to keep it in the euro. But the structural problems never got fixed. Youth unemployment in Greece hit 60% during the crisis. An entire generation was destroyed. Talented Greeks left and never came back. The economy shrunk by 25%. It was a depression, not a recession. And the debt? It's still there. Greece didn't fix anything. They just kicked the can down the road with more loans. And now, Italy is next. Italy is the third largest economy in the eurozone. If Italy goes, the euro goes. And if the euro goes, the entire European project collapses. We're talking about the biggest financial crisis in modern history. Bigger than 2008. Bigger than anything we've seen. Let me explain why Italy is the real bomb. Italy hasn't had meaningful economic growth in 20 years. Its GDP per capita today is basically the same as it was in 2000. 2 decades of stagnation. Its productivity is falling. Its companies aren't competitive. Its government is paralyzed by coalition politics. And its debt keeps growing. Every year, Italy borrows more just to keep the lights on. It's not investing in the future. It's barely surviving the present. And the problem is, Italy is too big to fail and too big to bail out. When Greece collapsed, Europe could afford the bailout because Greece is small. Its economy is less than 2% of the eurozone. But Italy is almost 15% of the eurozone. If Italy needs a bailout, we're talking about trillions of euros. And where does that money come from? Germany. Germany's budget is already stretched. France has its own debt problems. The ECB? If the ECB prints trillions to save Italy, you get inflation across the entire eurozone. Everyone pays. So you're stuck. You can't let Italy fail because it would destroy the euro. But you can't bail it out without destroying your own finances. It's a trap with no exit. And it gets worse. Because it's not just government debt. It's private debt too. European households and corporations are also heavily indebted. Spanish households are still recovering from the 2008 housing crash. Portuguese banks are loaded with bad loans. French companies took on massive debt during COVID. When interest rates were zero, everyone borrowed. Now those loans have to be repaid at higher rates. Defaults are coming. Bankruptcies are coming. And when they hit, the banks take the losses. Here's what keeps me up at night. Europe's debt crisis is going to hit at the worst possible time. Right when they need to spend massively on energy transition. Right when they need to rebuild their defense industries because of Russia. Right when they need to invest in AI and technology to compete with America and China. Right when their populations are aging and demanding more healthcare spending. All of this requires money. Lots of money. And Europe is already broke. So what happens? Either they cut spending, which means austerity, recession, social unrest, and political chaos. Or they keep borrowing, which means higher interest rates, inflation, and eventually a debt crisis that makes 2008 look like a warm-up. There's no good option. They're trapped between economic collapse and financial crisis. And the politicians are pretending everything is fine. But the bond markets know. Italian bond yields are rising. French bonds are under pressure. Even German bonds are starting to wobble. The markets are starting to price in risk. They're starting to ask the question nobody wants to answer. What if the euro doesn't survive the next crisis? And if the bond markets lose confidence, it's over. Because once borrowing costs spike, the debt spiral becomes unstoppable. You borrow more to pay interest, which makes your debt bigger, which makes your interest payments bigger, which means you borrow even more. It's a death spiral. And Europe is already halfway down. Europe's third fatal wound is energy. And this one is almost entirely self-inflicted. For decades, Europe built its entire industrial model on cheap Russian gas. Germany especially. German factories, German heating, German power plants, all ran on Russian pipeline gas that cost almost nothing. It was convenient. It was efficient. And it made Germany the industrial powerhouse of Europe. But it also made Germany completely dependent on Russia. And when Russia invaded Ukraine, that dependency became a weapon. Europe cut itself off from Russian energy almost overnight. Gas prices exploded. Electricity prices exploded. Industries that relied on cheap energy suddenly couldn't compete. Chemical plants in Germany started shutting down. Steel mills closed. Fertilizer companies moved production to America, where energy is a fraction of the cost. BASF, one of the largest chemical companies in the world, is now investing more in China and the US than in Europe. Because Europe can't offer competitive energy anymore. Let me give you some numbers that should shock you. Before the Ukraine war, European companies were paying around 20 to 30 euros per megawatt hour for electricity. After the war started, prices hit 300 euros per megawatt hour. 10 times higher. Some industrial users were paying even more during peak crisis moments. For comparison, electricity in Texas costs around $50 per megawatt hour. In China, it's even cheaper. How is a European factory supposed to compete with that? They can't. So they close. Aluminum smelters across Europe shut down because electricity is 40% of their costs. You can't smelt aluminum when power prices are 10 times higher than your competitors. Steel production dropped. Zinc production dropped. The entire metals industry in Europe is on life support. And these aren't jobs you get back. These are foundational industries. Once the expertise is gone, once the supply chains move, they don't come back. And here's the brutal truth. Europe has no good alternatives. Renewables sound great in theory, but solar and wind are intermittent. They don't provide the baseload power that heavy industry needs. You can't run a steel mill on solar panels when the sun isn't shining. You can't run a chemical plant on wind when the wind isn't blowing. You need consistent, reliable, cheap power. And renewables can't provide that yet. Maybe in 30 years with massive battery storage. But not today. Nuclear could have been the solution, but Europe spent the last 20 years shutting down nuclear plants because of environmental activism. Germany closed its last nuclear reactors in 2023, right in the middle of an energy crisis. It was insane. You're in the middle of an energy war with Russia, and you shut down your most reliable power source because of ideology. France, which used to be 70% nuclear, is now struggling to maintain its aging reactors and facing political pressure to phase them out. Sweden is debating it. Belgium delayed closures but is still planning phase-outs. Meanwhile, the rest of the world is going in the opposite direction. China is building nuclear reactors faster than anyone in history. They're completing 6 to 8 reactors per year. America is restarting nuclear development. Even countries like Poland and the Czech Republic are building new reactors. But Western Europe? Still debating. Still protesting. Still shutting down their most reliable energy source. So what's left? Importing liquefied natural gas from the United States and Qatar at 3 times the price of Russian pipeline gas. Building new LNG terminals. Begging Norway to increase production. None of this is cheap. None of this is fast. And none of this makes European industry competitive again. Let me tell you what this actually means for real people. Energy bills in Europe doubled or tripled for ordinary families. In the UK, people were choosing between heating and eating. In Germany, small businesses were closing because they couldn't afford electricity. In France, the government had to cap prices and subsidize energy, which added billions to their already massive debt. The energy crisis didn't just hurt industry. It devastated households. And it's not temporary. These high prices are the new normal. And here's the strategic nightmare. Energy security is national security. If you can't power your own economy, you're dependent on others. Europe went from being dependent on Russia to being dependent on America and the Middle East. They didn't gain independence. They just changed masters. And in a world where geopolitics is getting more dangerous, where wars over resources are becoming more common, energy dependence is a death sentence. China saw this coming decades ago. That's why they invested trillions in nuclear, solar, wind, batteries, everything. They wanted energy independence. America has it through shale gas and oil. Russia has it through vast resources. But Europe bet on Russian gas and green energy that wasn't ready. And now they're paying the price. The energy crisis is permanent. European industry is dying because of it. And there's no way out. Europe's fourth fatal wound is deindustrialization, the slow death of its industrial base. Europe used to make things: cars, machines, chemicals, steel, pharmaceuticals, electronics. It was an industrial continent. But over the last 2 decades, that's been slowly eroded. Factories moved to China where labor was cheaper. Regulations made it harder to build new plants. Energy costs made it harder to compete. And now, Europe is losing entire industries. Take cars. Europe's car industry is one of its last remaining industrial crown jewels. Volkswagen, BMW, Mercedes, Renault, Fiat, Volvo, Peugeot. These brands defined European engineering for a century. They were symbols of quality, precision, innovation. But right now, they're getting destroyed by Chinese electric vehicles. BYD, Geely, NIO, XPeng. These companies are making cheaper, better EVs and flooding the European market. European car makers are trying to catch up, but they're years behind. And they're doing it with higher costs, slower factories, and a regulatory environment that punishes them for every emissions gram. Volkswagen just announced massive layoffs and factory closures in Germany for the first time in its history. Tens of thousands of jobs are being cut. Plants that have been operating since the 1940s are shutting down. This is unprecedented. Volkswagen was supposed to be untouchable. It was Germany's industrial pride. And now it's in crisis. Stellantis, the company that owns Fiat, Peugeot, and Chrysler, is struggling. Even BMW is cutting production. The entire European auto industry is in retreat. And it's not just about EVs. It's about the entire supply chain. China controls the batteries, the lithium, the cobalt, the rare earth materials, the battery production facilities, the software. European car makers are trying to build an EV industry with Chinese components, Chinese technology, and Chinese competitors who are faster and cheaper. That's not a strategy. That's surrender. Let me explain what losing the auto industry actually means. In Germany alone, the auto industry employs over 800,000 people directly. Add in suppliers, logistics, dealers, and services, and it's more than 2 million jobs. The auto industry is 5% of Germany's entire GDP. If it collapses, Germany collapses. And Germany is 25% of the EU economy. So if Germany collapses, the EU collapses. This isn't just about cars. This is about the entire economic model of the continent. And it's not just cars. Steel production in Europe is collapsing. ArcelorMittal, Europe's largest steelmaker, is closing blast furnaces across the continent. They can't compete with Chinese steel that's made with cheaper energy and fewer environmental restrictions. European steel costs 50% more to produce than Chinese steel. So European construction companies and manufacturers just buy Chinese steel. And European steel mills close. Aluminum smelters are closing because electricity is too expensive. Norsk Hydro, one of Europe's biggest aluminum producers, shut down smelters in Slovakia and Germany. Alcoa closed its Spanish operations. It's not coming back. Once you shut down an aluminum smelter, you don't just restart it. The equipment degrades. The expertise leaves. The supply chain moves on. Chemical companies are moving to America and Asia. BASF, the world's largest chemical company, is shifting production to China and the US Gulf Coast. Why? Because natural gas in America costs a quarter of what it costs in Europe. And natural gas is the main feedstock for chemicals. BASF has been in Germany for 150 years. And now they're leaving. That should tell you everything. Even pharmaceutical production is shifting. Europe used to make its own antibiotics. Now, 80% of the active ingredients come from China and India. During COVID, Europe couldn't even make its own masks and ventilators. It had to import them. That's not an advanced economy. That's a dependent economy. That's a colony. Here's the terrifying part. Once you lose industrial capacity, it's almost impossible to get it back. Factories don't just reappear. You need engineers, skilled workers, supply chains, logistics networks, technical knowledge. It takes decades to build. And once it's gone, it's gone. You become a service economy. And service economies are fine if you're a global financial hub like London or a tech hub like San Francisco. But if you're a country of 60 million people like France or Italy, you need to make things. You need industry. Without it, you're just a large, expensive tourist destination. And that's what Europe is becoming. A museum. A place people visit to see what used to be. Beautiful old cities with no future. Expensive cafes with no innovation. Aging populations living off past glory. That's not a civilization. That's a retirement home. Europe's fifth fatal wound is its banking system. And this one is a ticking time bomb. European banks are fragile. Dangerously fragile. They're sitting on trillions in assets, but a huge portion of those assets are government bonds from deeply indebted countries. Italian banks hold Italian government debt. Spanish banks hold Spanish government debt. French banks hold French government debt. If those governments default or restructure their debt, the banks collapse. And if the banks collapse, the governments can't bail them out because they're already drowning in debt. It's a doom loop. Let me walk you through how this works. Banks are required by regulators to hold safe assets. And what's considered the safest asset? Government bonds. So Italian banks load up on Italian government bonds. They're considered risk-free because governments can supposedly always pay their debts. But what happens when Italy's debt becomes unsustainable? When interest rates spike? When investors start to worry about default? The value of those bonds crashes. And suddenly, Italian banks have massive losses on their balance sheets. They become insolvent. They need bailouts. But Italy can't afford bailouts because it's already broke. So the ECB has to step in. But if the ECB bails out Italian banks, German voters revolt. So the ECB hesitates. And in that hesitation, the crisis spreads. Contagion. This isn't theoretical. This is exactly what almost happened in 2011 and 2012 during the European debt crisis. It's why Mario Draghi, the ECB president at the time, had to make his famous whatever-it-takes speech to save the euro. The ECB promised to buy unlimited government bonds if necessary. And that promise calmed the markets. But it didn't fix the underlying problem. The doom loop is still there. The fragile banks are still there. The unsustainable government debt is still there. And next time, whatever it takes might not be enough. Deutsche Bank, Germany's largest bank, has been called the most dangerous bank in the world by financial analysts. It has a balance sheet of over €1 trillion, but its market capitalization is only around 25 billion. That's a tiny buffer. Its derivatives exposure is in the tens of trillions. If Deutsche Bank failed, it would make Lehman Brothers look like a small regional bank. The interconnections across the global financial system would cause a chain reaction. Credit would freeze. Markets would crash. We'd be in a depression, not a recession. And Deutsche Bank isn't alone. Credit Suisse already collapsed in 2023 and had to be absorbed by UBS in Switzerland in an emergency rescue. That was supposed to be a stable, conservative Swiss bank. And it failed. Unicredit in Italy is constantly under stress. Société Générale in France is struggling. Spanish banks are still dealing with bad real estate loans from the 2008 crash. The entire European banking sector is weak, over-leveraged, and one crisis away from disaster. And here's the thing. European banks aren't competitive anymore. They are not innovating. They are not growing. They are not profitable. American banks like JP Morgan, Bank of America, Goldman Sachs, they're making record profits. They're investing in technology. They're expanding globally. European banks are stuck managing old debt, dealing with regulators, and barely staying afloat. When was the last time a European bank launched something revolutionary? When was the last time a European fintech scaled globally? Revolut is British, but it's not a traditional bank. Klarna is Swedish, but it's payments, not banking. There's no European equivalent of JP Morgan or Goldman Sachs. No European bank that dominates globally. Why? Because European banking regulations are suffocating. Because profitability is low. Because growth is impossible when your home market is stagnant and aging. European banks are trapped in a low-growth, low-profit, high-risk environment. And every year that continues, they get weaker. And the next financial crisis will expose all of this. When interest rates rise further, when government debt becomes unsustainable, when a major economy like Italy faces a crisis, the banking system will crack. And this time, there's no easy bailout. The ECB can't print unlimited money without causing inflation that's already a political crisis. Governments can't bail out banks without collapsing their own finances. And there's no political will for a coordinated European response because nobody trusts each other. The banking crisis isn't a question of if. It's a question of when. Europe's sixth and final fatal wound is political division. And this might be the most unfixable of all. The European Union was supposed to be a unified bloc. A United States of Europe. Stronger together. Peace through integration. Economic power through unity. But the reality is, Europe is more divided now than it's been in decades. East versus West. North versus South. Creditors versus debtors. Nationalists versus federalists. Every major decision is a battle. Every crisis exposes deeper fractures. Look at migration. Germany and Sweden wanted open borders and took in millions of refugees. Hungary and Poland built fences and refused to take any. Italy and Greece were overwhelmed by arrivals and got no help from the north. The EU tried to implement migrant quotas to share the burden. Eastern Europe refused. The EU threatened sanctions. Eastern Europe didn't care. There's no unity. There's no solidarity. Just 27 countries looking out for themselves. Look at energy policy. Germany wanted to phase out nuclear and rely on Russian gas and renewables. France wanted to keep nuclear and reduce gas dependence. Poland wanted to keep coal because it's cheap and they have lots of it. The Baltics wanted to cut off Russia immediately. Hungary wanted to keep buying Russian gas. Every country had a different position. And when the crisis hit, there was no coordinated response. Everyone scrambled for their own deals. Look at fiscal policy. Germany wants fiscal discipline, balanced budgets, and austerity. Southern Europe wants spending, investment, and debt relief. During COVID, it took months to agree on a recovery fund. And even then, Hungary and Poland tried to block it over unrelated rule of law disputes. The EU is supposed to be a union, but every decision requires 27 countries to agree. That's not governance. That's paralysis. And it's getting worse. Right-wing populist parties are gaining power across Europe. In Italy, Giorgia Meloni's party has roots in post-fascist movements. In France, Marine Le Pen's National Rally gets a third of the vote. In Germany, the AfD is now the second largest party in some regions. In the Netherlands, Geert Wilders won the election. In Sweden, the Sweden Democrats are in government. In Hungary, Viktor Orban has been in power for over a decade and is openly defying EU rules. In Poland, PiS controlled the government for 8 years before losing narrowly. These parties don't believe in the European project. They want their sovereignty back. They want less Brussels, less integration, less immigration, less regulation. They want to put their own countries first. And their voters are growing. Why? Because the European Union hasn't delivered. It promised prosperity, but wages have stagnated for 20 years. It promised security, but migration and crime are rising. It promised unity, but every crisis shows how divided Europe really is. People are losing faith. And when people lose faith in institutions, those institutions collapse. The euro was supposed to bind Europe together. Instead, it's tearing it apart. Countries like Greece and Italy feel trapped in a currency they can't control, forced to follow rules set by Germany. They can't devalue their currency to boost exports. They can't run their own monetary policy. They're stuck in a system that doesn't work for them. Germany feels like it's constantly bailing out irresponsible southern countries. They're tired of paying for everyone else's mistakes. Nobody's happy. And the resentment is building. Brexit was just the beginning. The UK looked at the EU and decided the costs outweighed the benefits. They left. And despite all the predictions of disaster, the UK is still standing. It's not thriving, but it's not dead either. And that sends a message. Leaving is possible. If the EU economy continues to decline, if more crises hit, if the benefits of membership keep shrinking, other countries will start asking the same question. Why are we in this union? What are we getting out of it? And once that question becomes mainstream, the EU is finished. Here's what nobody wants to say out loud. The European project might have been a historical mistake. Not morally, not ideologically, but structurally. You can't have a currency union without a fiscal union. The United States works because there's a federal government that can transfer money from rich states to poor states. If California has a boom and Mississippi has a recession, federal spending automatically stabilizes Mississippi. But in Europe, if Germany booms and Greece crashes, there's no automatic transfer. Greece is on its own. Germany doesn't want to pay. And without that fiscal union, the currency union is unstable. You can't have open borders without unified immigration policy. If one country lets in millions of people, they can move freely to other countries. So every country has to agree on immigration. But they don't. They fundamentally disagree. And so the system breaks down. You can't have 27 sovereign nations pretending to be one country when they fundamentally disagree on everything. It doesn't work. It was always going to fail under pressure. And now the pressure is here. The EU works when times are good. When the economy is growing, when there are no crises, when everyone is getting richer. But when times are bad, when there's a recession, a migration crisis, an energy crisis, a banking crisis, the EU falls apart. Because there's no real unity. There's no shared identity. There's no willingness to sacrifice for each other. It's just a collection of countries that happen to trade with each other. So where does this leave Europe? You've got an aging population that's shrinking and creating an impossible dependency ratio. You've got debt that's unsustainable and growing every year with no plan to pay it off. You've got energy dependence that's crippling your industries and making you a strategic vassal. You've got factories closing and moving to other continents, taking your jobs and your future with them. You've got banks that are fragile, over-leveraged, and connected in ways that make systemic crisis inevitable. And you've got a political system that can't agree on anything and is being pulled apart by nationalist movements. These aren't separate problems. They are connected. Each one makes the others worse. The aging population increases debt because of pensions and healthcare. The debt makes it harder to invest in energy infrastructure or industrial policy. The energy crisis kills industry and makes you poorer. Deindustrialization destroys jobs and tax revenue, which increases debt even more. Banking fragility makes everything more unstable and prevents the investment needed to fix anything. And political division makes it impossible to solve any of it because you can't even agree on what the problems are, let alone the solutions. This is a system in terminal decline. Not a temporary recession. Not a rough patch. A long-term structural collapse that compounds over decades. It's not a sudden crash. It's a slow bleed. Death by 1,000 cuts. And the worst part? Most Europeans don't see it coming. They still think they live in a rich, stable, advanced continent. They still think the problems are temporary. They still think their politicians will figure it out. They still think the European dream is alive. But their politicians are out of options. The easy fixes are gone. The hard fixes require political will that doesn't exist. And time is running out. The rest of the world is already moving on. America is reindustrializing with the Inflation Reduction Act and CHIPS Act. Hundreds of billions in subsidies for manufacturing, semiconductors, green energy. They are bringing factories back. China is dominating manufacturing, EVs, batteries, solar panels, and moving up the value chain into AI and advanced technology. India is growing at 7% a year and is now the world's most populous country with a young, hungry workforce. Southeast Asia is becoming the next manufacturing hub. Vietnam, Thailand, Indonesia, all rising. The Gulf states are diversifying away from oil into technology, finance, and tourism. Even Africa is starting to develop with Chinese investment in infrastructure. And Europe? Europe is managing decline. Trying to hold on to what it has. Protecting legacy industries that are dying. Defending a political project that's fracturing. Pretending that the future will look like the past. By 2050, Europe's share of global GDP will have dropped from 22% in 2000 to maybe 10%. Its population will be older and smaller. Its industries will be weaker. Its influence will be diminished. It will be a second-tier power living in the shadow of America and China. This isn't a prediction. It's math. It's demographics. It's economics. It's already baked in. Some of you watching this are probably angry right now. You're thinking, this is too pessimistic. This is doom and gloom. Europe has been through worse. It survived 2 world wars. It rebuilt from rubble. It created the European Union and decades of peace. It can adapt again. It can innovate. It can find a way out. And maybe you're right. Maybe Europe will find a way. Maybe some miracle technology will solve the energy crisis. Maybe birth rates will suddenly reverse. Maybe the political divisions will heal. Maybe the debt will somehow become manageable. Maybe the banks will stabilize. Maybe the factories will stay. Maybe the young people will stop leaving. Maybe. But hope is not a strategy. And right now, all the trends are pointing in one direction. Down. Every indicator is negative. Every projection is worse than the last. Every year that passes, the problems get bigger and the solutions get harder. So here's the question you need to ask yourself. If you were 25 years old right now, and you had a choice between building your life in Europe or leaving for America, Asia, Australia, anywhere else with more opportunity, what would you choose? Would you stay in a place that's getting older, poorer, more regulated, more stagnant? Or would you go where the future is being built? Where the energy is? Where the growth is? Where your kids will have better opportunities than you did? That's the question millions of young Europeans are asking themselves right now. And more of them are choosing to leave. Brain drain. Talent flight. The best and brightest heading for the exits. And when that happens, it's over. Because a society that can't keep its young people is a society with no future. You're left with the old, the tired, the stuck. And you decay. Europe isn't going to collapse overnight. There won't be one dramatic moment where everything falls apart. There won't be tanks in the streets or governments fleeing in the night. It'll be slow, gradual, a long, grinding decline that most people won't even notice until it's too late. The cities will still look beautiful. The museums will still be open. The cafes will still be there. But the energy will be gone. The optimism will be gone. The innovation will be gone. The future will be gone. And one day, people will look back and ask, how did we let this happen? How did we go from being the center of the world, the birthplace of the Renaissance, the Enlightenment, the Industrial Revolution, to a museum of what used to be? How did we go from conquerors and explorers to tourists and retirees? The answer is simple. We ignored the warnings. We refused to make hard choices. We prioritized short-term comfort over long-term survival. We let politics paralyze us. We let ideology blind us. We let demographics crush us. And we ran out of time. Europe's collapse isn't coming. It's already here. It's happening right now. Most people just haven't realized it yet. They're still living in the memory of what Europe was, not the reality of what it's becoming. And the tragedy is, it didn't have to be this way. Europe had time. It had resources. It had talent. It had institutions. But it made the wrong choices at every turn. It chose Russian gas over energy independence. It chose austerity over investment. It chose division over unity. It chose comfort over reform. And now it's paying the price. If this video made you rethink everything you thought you knew about Europe's future, then you need to see what's happening on the other side of the world. Because while Europe declines, other powers are rising fast. And the global order you grew up with is about to be completely rewritten. The 21st century won't belong to Europe. It won't even remember Europe except as a cautionary tale. That story is next. And trust me, you're not ready for it. Thank you for watching. If this opened your eyes to something you hadn't considered before, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because the people who understand what's really happening will be the ones prepared for what comes next. The future is being built right now, and Europe isn't building it. See you in the next video.